Hello and welcome back to another episode. I'm your coach, Kat, and today I've been asked a question about something I talked about a while ago on TikTok about covert contracts. And now I know the word covert probably arcs up all of those people whose ears are pricked about covert narcissists and gaslighters and abusers and all of the things that you might happen to fall into the algorithm of if you've come out of a challenging friendship or relationship or family dynamic. And I want to talk about covert contracts today because it's something that we all do for no fault of our own, just from the programming and the movements of life that we've experienced. We all do this. And a lot of us, we're just doing it because we're moving unconsciously. We do cultivate the majority of our actual lives through unconscious programs. 95% actually is what the studies show. And last week we talked about one of the most favorite subjects that I have, which is relationships. And we discussed things that could be discussed and talked about and decided on when entering a relationship. And one of the most important things, I believe, in what we talked about last week was expectations. Now, expectations are covert contracts, essentially, because most of us have expectations of the connections that we go into that are based on our model of the world. So I'm going to say that again. Most of us have expectations of the connections that we go into based on our model of the world. They're based on what was modeled to us specifically. And some of those expectations are in a really positive light, and sometimes they aren't. And not placing any attention or awareness on them within ourselves, but then also bringing the intention of the conversation of it into any connection or relationship can really create a divide from the get-go. You won't see the divide from the get-go, but you'll usually see it if and when things come apart. Now, this can sound like overkill, and for a new or existing relationship or friendship, it might feel like a bit much. And I'm wondering how your friendships and your relationships have been going. And if you're listening to the things that I teach and I talk about week on week, maybe it's not been going so well. So perhaps you could start to open your mind to a new way of bringing intention and conversation and more connection into your relationships. And this can apply to friendships, relationships, colleagues, the whole shebang. Now, I'm going to share a few examples of bad experiences because a covert contract is not aware of, let alone communicated. And I'm wondering if you can relate to any. And these are really just like the basic surface level ones. Like, I'm not even going to get into toxic ones, #toxic. You guys know how I feel about that word. But it can be simple things like, if someone is, a people pleaser or whatever label you want to give it, and they go into their relationships and they're like, I'm going to be really super nice. And there's an expectation that that should be how the other person is in return, because that's their model of the world. That's what they've witnessed in relationships. Everyone's just super nice back and forth from what they've seen. And maybe it's not what the other person has seen or experienced or been modeled to them. Another is, maybe you're going to be super real and super honest and loyal. It's just what you were taught. You're only going to be with this person that's in front of you. You're only going to engage with them. You're not going to talk to anyone else. However, the person that you're with might have had a different experience. They might have had different things modeled to them throughout their life. So they have a different expectation of a relationship or a different experience that they now model. Another that's really been potent, I know, in my life is, I'm going to assume, so let's say me in relationship, I'm going to assume the best in you. I'm going to assume the best, and I'm going to assume that you're good for your word. and that there's a mutual respect of that kind, when things are good, but also when things are challenging. Except I now know that I'm quite blessed to have had that modeled to me, because so many people have had different things modeled to them. And so that does not land or does not make sense. So if I don't communicate it and I'm giving that and then just expecting it in return from someone who's never even experienced a connection like that, that's where things can get surprising in a not so great manner. Or even saying things as simple as like, I'm going to do things for you and I expect you to do the similar things in return. Like, we could talk about love languages and how everyone has a different type of language in which they communicate care and love. And if I love to give gifts, let's say, I'm not a gifts person, but we'll just use that as an example. If I love to give gifts, but the person receiving like gifts is their bottom love language and the top is time and attention or touch, then it's not going to be received as love. It's just going to be like, oh, cool, a thing. Thanks. Like, I really appreciate it. Whereas what they really need to receive, to feel love, to experience love, is their love language, which is time and quality time together or touch or whatever it is. So being aware of that can be so powerful, so that whatever it is that you're giving, you can't just be expecting the same in return if you don't know if that's how that person gives. Does that make sense, everyone? So we can break it down today into a couple of different examples. So we'll do one for friendships and we'll do one for romantic relationships, right? So let's look at friendships. So what is your experience of friendship? Have a think about it. And think about past friendships that may still exist in your reality, and maybe they've come to pass or been removed or however it's gone down for you. And think about what it is that you maybe don't like so much, that doesn't quite flow the way you wanted it to. And then also think about friendships that have just been epic, like friendships that have been epic love stories almost, where it's just been like this amazing feeling and everything's felt easy and flowy and fun. And how can you take what you don't like and what you do like into your existing friendships or new friendships that come along and communicate that? Like, did you like having that quality time together? Did you just love going over to each other's houses and taking a nap and reading books quietly on different couches? Or did you prefer going out for lavish lunches and cocktails? Or did you love to hug and touch your friends? Or was it more of a, civil, slightly disconnected kind of connection? What is it that made those experiences great and not so great for you specifically? So you start to put together a picture of what you love and what you enjoy and what you want to experience in the future, so you know how to communicate it. And if we look at the difference between male and female friendships, for example, is females love to have that emotional connection and the talking and the spending time together and that nourishment, right? Whereas male friendships, it's a lot less emotionally connected. So males love the social support and to do stuff together, whereas women are more emotional and love that kind of more intimate, nourishing, connected support. And then if we look across to romantic relationships, starting to think about what has been modeled to you throughout your life, what was modeled to you in childhood by your parents or whoever raised you, what was modeled to you throughout your schooling. Did you get to witness other relationships or, friends' parents and things like that? Did you, as you moved through high school and everyone started dating, what was modeled to you then? What did you observe? What did you hear about? What was your experience moving through that? Like starting to piece together, like, what is it that I think a relationship is. What is it that I think the different roles are supposed to be? What is it that I'm expecting someone to be giving me specifically that I maybe freely give, or maybe I don't. Maybe I just sit there and expect to get all of these things without doing anything, right? It depends what was modeled to us. And so starting to ask yourself, what was modeled to me? What is it that I think a relationship entails? What is it that I think I must give or show up to a relationship as? What is it that I expect to be getting back, whether or not I do anything? And what is it that you want from that? Like, do you want the relationships that were modeled to you, or would you like to start creating a new picture, a new expectation, a new model for yourself? Perhaps getting some new relationships in your life, perhaps connecting with people, whether it's in the world or online, who have beautiful relationships. Like I said on the podcast last week, I have many great couples in my life and they're fantastic. And a lot of them are still quite fresh in their relationships. So as much as I love them and I respect them and I love to observe and learn with them, I'm going to look for relationship advice to people who have been in a relationship for 20, 30, 50 years, right? Who have beautiful ways that they can share the wisdom of what's worked for them, what's not, how they connect, how they build business together, whatever that may be. So starting to go, okay, well, do I want what was modeled to me? Because if the answer is no, is great. Well, perhaps since I'm creating 95% of my reality from my unconscious programs, which is what was modeled to me, if I don't want to be experiencing that, then maybe I need to start taking some intentional time and making some conscious effort to change that program in all the ways that I possibly can. And that brings it back to that communication with self before we step into communication with anyone else outside of us. So what do you want? What do you want to expect? What do you want to give? And how do you communicate that when things are going great, but also when things aren't going great? So I'll give you a juicy, spicy example, everyone, just because I know that you love to hear a little bit more about my life. And I promise you the books are coming. And while I slowly piece that together, you get little moments on here. But for me, especially in more recent years, I've been a lot more selective with the people that I've shared my energy with. It has been very few and far between, let's just put it that way. And still, if I look at the last 3 relationship, I want to call them, however they wouldn't, I would say I loved how I showed up in so many ways because I'd learned so much at this point about myself and about relationships and about what I wanted. And I know the one thing that was challenging for me was communicating what I knew and what I wanted and what I expected to give and also to receive when things were going really well. This was my challenge. So I'm going to lead with that. This was my challenge because things were going really well and it was really exciting. And so I was holding back on actually asking for what I wanted and sharing what I expected from what I was giving. And because of that piece, things didn't go so well. And I wanted to share, and this can only be my perception of these situations because I still don't have the only feedback I ever got was I'm not ready for a relationship or I'm too scared to get into this kind of relationship. Literally, that's all I've really gotten as feedback, and that's fine. And I showed up as being pretty stable in myself and knowing what I wanted, but, like I said, maybe not communicating it as clearly and bravely as I could have. But I'm the kind of person in a relationship where I'm totally fine, like having a little bit of distance here and there. Like it doesn't need to be all in all the time. in the past, years and years ago, I was incredibly codependent. So this has been a really intentional thing for me to be like, I'm actually cool with you going off with your friends. I'm actually super cool with us having some time apart, because I am working on a business. I am working on a mission, and I want that other person to be doing the same thing so that we're both moving towards our same mountains. You know, if you need some time and space to deal with whatever's coming up on your head, like, I'm here for it. I'm here for you. And if you need space, cool, I'll go do my thing. And there's been a number of times in different connections where that conversation has been had, and I've gone and done my thing and just gone and worked on myself or worked on my business and taken a week off, or just left space for that person to have their process, which is what I thought was happening due to the communications that had been had. However, and again, I can only speculate because the feedback I've gotten is very minimal, but that can sometimes create space in someone else's mind to create stories that aren't reality. So if I were to know in a situation like this, and I've watched a lot of girls go through similar things with guys, and guys go through similar things with girls, where in the absence of data, and Brene Brown says this best, in the absence of data, the mind will create a story from its own model of the world, its own programming, its own expectations that a lot of the times are negative when they haven't actually been cultivated the way we want them to be, right? And that's the whole point of this conversation. And when I have stepped back and created that space and said, that's cool, I actually honor what you're saying you want or you need, and that's really cool, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go and focus on this, and I'm here, and I'm going to maybe not text you for a few days because you said you needed space. And in the absence of the data, in the absence of more communication, perhaps a mind could create a story of like, oh, she's actually seeing someone else, or oh, she's not that into it, or oh, she's you know, talking to other people, that's why she doesn't have to talk to me all the time, whatever that person's experience might have been in the past. And I know for a few men that I've witnessed this in, not just the ones that I've seen, but also the ones that I've been in interaction with, have had relationships in the past where that's like the opposite of the behavior that they're used to, right? They're used to like attack, or they're used to someone getting really arced up that they need space, or they're used to some kind of behavior. So for someone to be totally different and be like, actually, that's totally fine, I'm cool with that, I'm going to go do my thing, you're awesome, and let's talk soon because I really like hanging out with you and I want to keep doing this. And also I'm cool to go focus on my stuff while you focus on yours, and let's meet once we've worked out whatever's going on in our heads. And, you know, sometimes it's been days and sometimes it's been a week. And in that space, if there is negative modeling that we've had in that space, the mind will usually create a story to protect us from anything from the past happening again. And it's been fascinating to witness the stories that have been created in that space that just weren't reality. And this is why this is a really passionate thing for me, to place in your awareness the power that everyone has to change their programming, the power that everyone has to be aware of your covert contracts, the things that you expect are going to happen because of anything that happens, because of what's been modeled to you? Or are you taking an active approach to actually do something about that programming, to create and cultivate the friendships and the relationships that you really want, and how to communicate those at all? And like I said, if I were to go back, I definitely would have asked for what I wanted, been clearer about what I wanted, and communicated that I'm aware of all of this, bravely and honestly, without being like, oh, I don't want to scare them away, or I don't want to be too much, or all the different things, right? And I can tell you right now, I get in a loop constantly from all of the do's and don'ts and all the data that I've absorbed about this subject over the years. And I want y'all to have fun in your relationships, and I also want you to cultivate incredible ones, because connection and relationship is literally the reason we're here. It's literally why we're here. And when you can start to bring a conscious approach and an intentional approach to the relationship with you first, of course, but then also your friendships, your romantic relationships, your marriage, your colleagues, your staff, your team, it brings everything up and it makes it all so much more fun. So, when you meet someone new, whether it's a friend or whatever the capacity is, like, communicate what you want. Be like, hey, I actually really love just spontaneous hangs. So like, I'm probably going to call you just to see what you're up to see if you want to go do something when I know that I'm free to go do something. Or I actually really love to plan things because I have a schedule that I'm trying to stick to run a business. Like, what does that communication look like? Do you love to text people daily? And do you really want to receive that in return? Do you love gifts? Do you love no gifts? I personally am not a gifts person. I just want to hang out and do spontaneous cool things. And communicating how you communicate, or maybe how you want to communicate because you haven't been able to in the past. And communication, what does that look like when things are really great and exciting? But also, how does that communication look when things are challenging? And I mentioned it last week, and I'll mention it again because there was a great comment on TikTok recently in relation to this that I'll share. And you can take it or leave it. It's a bit of a funny one, but I talked about Brene Brown's story rumble hour. And so when you're creating a story with the limited data to communicate with that person, rather than communicating with all your friends and colleagues and anyone but that person, this is where things can really fall apart, because none of those people are actually in that one-to-one interaction with you. So they actually have no idea. And so if you're taking limited data to friends or colleagues or family members, they're just going to usually reverberate back fear and doubt and keep you safe. So yeah, you must be right about that person. You must have the right story about that story that you're cultivating with the limited data. So yeah, maybe you should end it, steer clear of it, move away from that person, put a boundary up, all the things, right? Except with better communication, you might actually find that whole story you create in your mind is not reality. And the thing in front of you is actually what you've been calling in. And it just requires a bit more communication. So if there's a story being created in your head, how can you go to the person that you're creating the story about and be like, hey, I'm creating a story in my head right now about this, or because you did this, or because you said this, or because you looked at me a different way, or because you didn't text me, or because you did text me, and go, what's the reality for you? And as the person in my TikTok comments said recently, she said, me and my partner call it the conspiracy theory chat. She's like, we go to each other and go, hey, I'm creating conspiracy theory in my head about this thing that happened the other day, and I'd love for you to help me debunk it. And I was like, that's genius. It's so fun. And I love that they do that in their relationship. I've actually met a couple of couples recently who have a little thing that they say to each other when stories are being created from limited data and from old models of the world that they're wanting to leave behind. So it can be such a powerful and simple tool to have a difficult conversation that so many of this generation seem incapable of having. And I get it. It sucks. Like, no one wants to have a tricky conversation. It's so much easier to go gossip and bitch and moan about it to other people, because the brain actually will seek that because it gets a boost of dopamine for doing so. So being aware of that is a great step. And instead facing off with the situation that might feel super scary and unknown and uncomfortable, but really with a few simple words, you'll probably debunk the whole conspiracy theory that you've created in your mind and realize, oh, wow, this person, this friendship, this team member, this beautiful romantic relationship in front of me is actually kind of cool and totally new. And maybe I can start to play with the fact that I'm creating something that I've always wanted, rather than just creating the same program over again. And keep doing it, keep communicating. And so that's all I had today on covert contracts. And I'd really love to know if this resonated with you guys. And if you are now starting to go, oh my God, I think I realized that I go in expecting to get all the same things in return that I'm giving. And then I'm getting pissed off or upset when they don't do it back automatically, but maybe they just have a different thing that's been modeled to them. And maybe if I just communicated what I wanted, it could work. So if this is hitting you, I'd love to hear your feedback. You guys know you can reach out with me anytime. The info's in the show notes. And it has been a super short conversation today. I am craving having some much bigger conversations in 2023, and I'm working on bringing you some amazing guests. So if there's anyone that you would love to see or hear from on this show, please make sure you connect us and reach out and let me know, so that I can work on that for us. And we will continue answering all of your questions and requests for different subjects in between the amazing guests. And I'm really looking forward to the next amazing and expansive conversation on how we can all learn to grow and improve, so that we can all create and cultivate the lives that we really want, that we know are possible. And with that, I will see you all next time.